And good Monday afternoon. It is Monday, October 7th, just after 1 p.m. My name is Ryan Belmore, owner and publisher of What's Up Noop, and we are chatting with the candidates all last week. All this week, we'll be chatting with candidates for Newport City Council as well as Newport School Committee. Back in August, we invited all of the candidates to join us for a one-on-one 30-minute conversation, really as a way to get to know who they are, get a little bit of their personality, find out what they stand for, priorities, what they would like to see happen, what opportunities they see, why they want your vote. We see this. We started this series back during COVID because people couldn't go door to door. And we thought it was a good way for people to get to know the candidates. We've kept it going. We think it gives a little bit more than a 30-second answer at a forum. There's nothing wrong with forums. We just like this, where if people have the time, really want to be informed voters, they can really get to know candidates via this way. If you want to watch any of the interviews, we are uploading them live right on whatsupnuke.com as they happen. All last week we chatted with candidates. This week we'll continue them. You can watch them all there. You can share them there. You can listen to them, read them, watch them, all available on there. Early voting starts on Wednesday, October 16th, a week from this Wednesday. And then general election is on November 5th. If you are not registered to vote, you missed the deadline. It was yesterday. I think that's all I got. Today is a school committee day. We're chatting with 4 candidates for school committee. Only 1 right now, but 3 more throughout the day. And we are on school committee, and we are with Dr. Robert B. Power. Robert, how are you?
Good. I'm great. Thank you.
And I'm glad you got the good gear on.
I've got the my sign. I wear my sign.
Perfect. Perfect. You ran for election last time around, so 2 years ago.
I did.
People in Newport are probably familiar with it, but there may be plenty who aren't. But you've been involved in schools for a little bit, so give us the background. What should people know about you?
Well, I think what people should know is I start off with many candidates. So I've been in Newport for a lot of years. So I grew up here in Newport. That's a good thing and a bad thing. I mean, but I do have a history of knowing how things have operated and what happens. I have a doctorate in school administration, so education is my my wheelhouse. I have been a superintendent in 3 different school districts in Rhode Island, so I have a perspective on how schools operate. I did serve on the school committee a number of years ago, and so I have that perspective. Plus, having been a superintendent, I've had to work with school committees. On the other side, as administrator, and for many years I was a central office administrator, so I had an opportunity to work with school committees in that capacity. And I've also worked in a number of school districts in Rhode Island as a vice principal up in South Providence, as a vice principal in Westerly. I've worked in the Pawtucket school systems. I've been in 11 different school districts, so I have a lot of different ways to take when I look at things, I look at things from a variety of perspectives.
Sounds like you've had a long, successful career in schools. What makes you want to run to dedicate your time off to serving Newport Public School System?
Well, quite honestly, I was not going to run for school committee. And what got me to get into the race was the fact that in the Rogers High School project, they have engineered out or not put in auto tech and cosmetology. And I think those are extremely important programs. I understand they took the auditorium down and the students are going to get a lesser meeting space, and they took down a fabulous gym, which, people would tell you is probably the best gym in Rhode Island for basketball, but I understand where that went. I was not anticipating that the Career Tech Center was going to come down. And if it was going to come down, I anticipated that the auto tech and cosmetology would be put into the Rogers High School building. And so when I realized, most recently, I thought they were going to keep the auto tech program and cosmetology in that building. But for whatever reason, and it sounds like it has to do with a sewer line that needs to go through a building, they're going to take that building down. And so I felt, I needed to get in and say, listen, this is an important these are important programs. When you start cutting programs for kids, you're going in the wrong direction. I understand value engineering. I understand, the problems in Newport. Financially, I'm a taxpayer here. Have been for years and years and years. But that was what drove me to do it. I was begging them. I said, look, just keep those programs, and I'll stay out of the race. There'll be one less person to contend with. But that's why I've jumped back into that. Also, I have a background that when issues come up, I've had the opportunity to see them in other places, so I can bring that experience to the table. So it's not like it's just one thing that I know how to do. There's a lot of things, and I was actually part of I ran the building committee for Thompson, so I understand how buildings get built. I led that committee, and that came in on time and under budget. And I realized that the pandemic has thrown their budget out of whack, as it has a lot of things in this country. But I think that for the amount of money we're talking about, and for programs for kids, I think it's the obligation of school committee people to step up and advocate for those kids.
Yeah, I'm wondering, with a project that's already over budget due to inflation, some other things, and some value engineering going on, how if you were elected to school committee, how do you see adding those two projects back to the construction, or is it too late?
Well, first of all, I would say to you that if the bond that they're asking for people to passes, that's $98 million. I would certainly think that the first bit of that money I would use to complete a project that's underway. A lot of the other things that they're talking about with that money are projects that haven't, the shovel has not gone in the ground. This project's going up. So I think, we need to finish that project. It needs to be done right. I think it's a project that people need to be proud of. And I don't feel that there's that joy around the high school at the moment. I think it's more of, oh, this building's costing us all this money, people feeling bad about it. I think they should be feeling good about the high school, and I think it should be done right. And, I've been around long enough that I remember when there was a sewer line between Long Wharf and the sewer treatment plant that broke. That was a $14 million problem. And the city fixed the $14 million problem. We're talking about two programs up at the high school that are probably $6 million. I think that Newport can find the $6 million. There's a pile of dirt there that's going to have to get moved. That doesn't have to be moved tomorrow. It will get moved, and it could be done in pieces. But in the meantime, I think we should finish that school, and it should be done in a way that people feel that everything got included. Value engineering is a nice way to say we're cutting stuff out of the project or buying less materials. But as I said before, when you start taking programs away from kids, especially these two programs, which are the highest subscribed programs that they have at the Career and Tech Center, it's just not the right move.
Yeah, there is $10 million in the $98.5 million bonds that Newport voters will vote on, with a line item, Rogers High School landfill and disposition of remaining soil, Rogers completion. You think it wouldn't be it would be okay to put that under there?
Well, I think that I would start with the programs with the kids, and then I would work on getting rid of the dirt pile. But the dirt pile doesn't have to be gone instantaneously. But if we don't get these programs in there for these kids, it will never happen. I mean, you've got people on site right now. You've got the contractors on site. You've got the architects there. If you wait long enough, then you're starting about a whole new program, starting all over, and it will never get done. And it's a shame.
You've mentioned that you brought it to the attention of school committee. You didn't mention higher ups like the superintendent or anybody. Just wondering the response. Have they been open? Have they? What has their response been to your thoughts on this?
Well, let me just say this. Every person that I've talked to since I've started running for office that I brought this topic up to, and I'm talking about people on the streets, I'm talking to everybody agrees that those programs should be there. There's nobody that doesn't think that that's a bad idea. I shouldn't say there's nobody. I talked to somebody who thought that those programs were lesser programs and maybe we shouldn't have those. But most of the people I've spoken to believe that that's something that should be done. They've encouraged me, to put that out there, and that's what I'm doing. And if I don't get elected because that's the issue I brought up, and people don't agree with me, then so be it. But somebody's going to have to stand up for these kids, and somebody's going to stand up and say this isn't right, and that's what I'm going to do.
Why has there been any reception by school committee members to this idea, or asking you for ideas or your experience to bringing these products up? And why don't you think that it's a priority?
Well, no, I think the school committee is behind me on this. I don't think that they're not in favor of this. I think that the school committee maybe is doubtful that the council will look upon this favorably because of the cost that the cost overruns for the high school. However, I think that if the school committee doesn't go in front of the council and say, listen, this is what the building costs, and the program should be included in that number as opposed to taking it away, you're actually working against yourself. You're negotiating against yourself. I mean, I don't think that's the strategy.
Yeah. What else have you been hearing?
I've talked to some of the people who are running for city council, and they agree that they think that those are great programs and they should be there.
What else have you been hearing from people since you have announced your campaign? What else are people chirping you about?
Well, I mean, as it's been in the press, you see the whole relationship between the between the union and the school administration. That's out there. This is not the first time that this has happened in Newport. I mean, I go back long enough to know that we had these kind of problems before. We had, the threat of a teacher's strike back when the teachers could strike. And one of the things we actually ended up doing, there was a guy from the War College who got involved, and we took the administration and the teachers, and we went up to MIT, Harvard. They had MIT and Harvard have a combination program. It was all about, negotiations and getting to yes. And we kind of reset the way that the relationship between the administration and the school committee went. I mean, and the teachers union was. And it was, because I'll tell you that teachers union back then was very contentious. I mean, they were not easy to deal with. They advocated for a lot of stuff. I mean, the contract that they have today and the contract they had a number of years ago has changed drastically. There was a time that there was a manning clause in the contract that you couldn't lay people off. You had to have X amount of people in the contract. There are a lot of stuff that's changed over time. And that came from going to that kind of programming and being able to have a dialogue and being able to get people to understand each other's side and why certain things were transpiring. And I've always found, for me, when I've worked with the union, and as you probably know, I went into Thompson Middle School 2 years ago when they had a problem in leadership over there. There was a bit of a hiccup, and the first thing I did was to go and talk with the people in the building. And when I say talk to people in the building, it wasn't text messages and it wasn't emails. It was person to person, face to face. And I was able to get a lot of cooperation from that. But I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you have to do.
Speaking of contentious and cooperation, does the relationship between school committee, city council improve for the sake of education in Newport?
It's exactly what I just said. It's one of those things that you pick up a phone and you call somebody on the city council and you talk to them, or you go see them in person and you say, these are the things that I'm looking for, or this is the problem I have, and what are your thoughts? And they will tell you, here's some of the things that I'm working on, here's some of the things I can do, and here's some of the things that I can't do. And when people explain to you sometimes, what some of their parameters are that they're dealing with, sometimes you can help them to, to work through those parameters, or you can give them suggestions of things that they hadn't thought about that they can say, oh, I didn't realize that. Going back a number of years, there was a guy at the legislature, Paul Crowley. I'm sure you've heard the name. And so I was trying to ask him about, state money for Newport. And he said, Bob, he said, you have to get the votes. And he said, you go up there and you say you're from Newport and you say, we've got all the tourists and they take all this time and it costs us all this money. He said, the next guy in line is going to say to you, you know what, we've got the airport and the planes fly over us. We have to have all this noise and we need some compensation. And then Johnston jumps in and says, we have a landfill and everybody dumps their garbage in our backyard. He said, so until you get a group of people that have a common interest, that you can get the votes, that's what you have to get. And it kind of opened my eyes because I'm thinking, here we are, Newport, the cash cow. And yet, when you think about it, there's plenty of other communities in the state that have other things they contribute. And they see, that there's a burden on them because of what sits in their backyard.
It's too easy and too often that we hear about the opportunities or what's not going well in regards to scores or rankings with education in Newport. What do you think the actual honest state of education is? How well are we doing, or is it really as bad as some of the biggest people on Nextdoor tell you?
Well, first of all, one of the problems we have with education has to do with the people trying to make a judgment based on test scores alone. And test scores alone came around back in, I want to say it was the Bush administration, because they were giving federal money to states and they wanted some kind of accountability to where their money was going. And, and test scores are a tricky business because back when I first started in education, I called the guy up at the Department of Education. I said, tell me about test scores. And he's the guy that's in the closet you never see with the thick glasses that just crunches numbers. He said, I'm going to make it very simple for you. He says, it's socioeconomics. He says, it's tied to socioeconomics. If you look at where the test scores are the highest, it's in communities where, there's the most money. He said, that's a piece. Having looked at that piece, and I think you heard from another candidate, that our scores, and I think it was Molly, who's running for school committee, said, our scores are not as bad as you think they are if you look at, where they are with some of the state numbers. So, there's that piece. There's also, we have a mobility issue in Newport. We have kids that come and go out of this community because their parents come and go out of this community. So even though we may have early childhood programs and we have middle school programs and we have support programs, a lot of the kids that we have are not kids that have been with us for a long period of time. I'd love to see the scores of a kid who's been here from kindergarten through grade 12 that we've had an opportunity to work with all that time. I'm sure that those scores are going to be different than some of the other scores you'd see. And the other thing that you have to take a look at is curriculum alignment. Our curriculum has to be aligned to what we're testing. Massachusetts has had a test that they've used for many, many years, and they haven't changed the test. Rhode Island has changed the test 3 or 4 times, and I'm not assured that we have the curriculum alignment for the test. And the way I explain that is, if you go to the Registry of Motor Vehicles, they give you a book. So you read the book, you come back here, the test is going to be on the book. If you know what's in the book, you'll pass the test. That's a curriculum alignment. There's the curriculum, it's aligned to the test. That's not necessarily true with Rhode Island testing. So when you're trying to get kids to learn things and they change what the test is, or they change things around, or you don't have an alignment that you're teaching things that are not in the test, that's going to be a problem for you.
What do you judge? And you've had quite possibly every single role in education. What do you judge success in education on?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the first things I look at, and I've worked in Little Compton, where you can imagine those parents are looking at that school real close. And I've been in Jamestown as a superintendent, where those parents look at the school real close. And then I've worked in Newport. It has to do with how happy, how satisfied are the parents with the schools. Testing is one thing, but the overall satisfaction of parents with their kids going to school and how they feel the teachers deal with their kids and how they feel that their sports teams are and how they feel and the kids want to go to school and they're happy to go to school. Those are the kinds of things you look at. When I was in Jamestown, we were looking at trying to get kids' test scores to match the Barrington test scores. So I went to Barrington. I said, what is it that Barrington does that Jamestown's not doing? Well, what I find out was that in the elementary schools, that if kids were getting a B in a subject, the parents in Barrington would get their kids tutored to get them to an A. That was the way that they were working and looking at education. In Newport, we're back on some very basic things about trying to get kids to come to school and to stay in school. But a lot of that has to do with where they come from in their home environment. Oftentimes, people complain about a child or what's going on. And when you bring the parents in, you get a much better understanding of what's going on in that child's life. And you say, I get it now. When they tell you that they've now had to move to their third apartment in 1 year and they're working 3 jobs, and you're trying to say to them, well, why aren't you spending time doing X, Y, and Z with their child? It's a different thing. And Newport, I think, does a great job of bringing in social service agencies and bringing in the community at large to help support these kids.
And how does school committee, if elected as a member of school committee, how do you play a role in the big picture? What are the biggest opportunities, priorities you see out there?
Well, I think that the school committee sets the tone for advocacy for kids. The school committee has a very limited role now. There was a time when they had a lot more involvement in the operation of the schools, but now they're dealing with policy, and policies are very important because policies can dictate a lot of things that happen in the schools. And then you've got the budget, and you look and see where your money is being spent in your budget. Those two pieces are really the ones that you can control the most. But you've also, school committees can be advocates for the teachers, for the kids, for the parents, for the administration.
Yeah. So you mentioned auto tech, cosmetology. What else would be a priority if elected?
Well, again, as I said earlier, I think that one of the things we're going to have to work on very, very hard is the 2 things. One is the relationship with the council, because that really needs to be on track, because that's where the money comes from for the schools. And the other piece is the relationship that the teachers have with the district. Those are 2 things that really need to be on point. And there's ways to get to those. And it has to do a lot with dialogue, and it has to do with relationships, and you have to build relationships with council people. And I would go back to what I said earlier about the training prospect of maybe we need to take a look at where the union leadership is and where the administration is, and see if we can't get some kind of training or something to take a look at if there's a better way for us to be interacting with each other.
From the way I understand it, I think it makes sense when people say it's just because people are having less kids. But you, as a longtime person in education, how concerned are you about declining enrollment? It's not just a Newport issue, but how does Newport, because that changes a lot of stuff with budgeting and schools, and whereas 5th grade, we're hearing now that 5th grade might move back, and how concerned are you with declining enrollment?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I worked in Bristol Warren at the time. It was Bristol, and the Warren High School had gotten down to a very low number, and they were looking for a place for their kids to go. And Bristol had the 8th grade at the high school, and they didn't like that. So it became advantageous to put the 2 districts together, and that meant giving up, the colors of the high school. It meant changing names, but that transpired. So as I started looking at the numbers of Newport, I said, well, the numbers get down low enough, you're looking at regionalization. But then I don't know what I was reading, but all of a sudden I discovered that over in Exeter, West Greenwich, that they have about 1,500 kids in their school district, and they have a high school. So I said, gee, I wonder what Narragansett looks like. Well, Narragansett's got 400 and some kids, and they have a high school. And there are about, I think, 1,200 kids in their school district. So initially I was thinking, the way our numbers are going, that really forces our hand in regionalization. And then I start saying to myself, because Middletown's building what they're building and we're building what we're building, and you've got a couple of districts in this state that you could make an argument that are smaller than Newport by far at this point, and they have not regionalized per se. I mean, Exeter and West Greenwich are together, but that's a district. That maybe Newport does end up standing alone. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. If I had that crystal ball to be able to see the future, I think the mistake that we made was when they wanted to regionalize, they brought consultants in, and the consultants, instead of, they used theoretical ideas that people could poke holes in. If they had just gotten the two superintendents together and said, give us a budget if you put the two districts together, people would have been able to see the actual numbers, and they would have been able to talk about what programs they had and where they could have put them. And they wouldn't have been theoretical. And then people would have had something they could say, I got that. And it only lost by 400 votes. And when people asked me, should you vote for it? I couldn't tell them yes, because I didn't know what we were voting on. It was the regionalization, but I didn't know what it was going to look like. Now, if you could put that together and people could see what it looks like, people would know what they're voting on.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like, listening to the city council and the school committees, that people are very interested in regionalization. They're not anti-regionalization.
I think it was, from the outside looking in, I think it was confusion. It was kind of a forced conversation leading right up to an election season, and people were confused by, I went to Coventry High School District, which is, I think, the largest probably in the state, seeing Coventry is so big. And I just look at how far we traveled for a high school, and I'm like, there could be one high school on Aquidneck Island some days where it'd be the same distance. So
right.
Yeah.
What
else did you want to get to today that we have not already gotten to?
No, I think that, I don't want to make this election complicated for people. And my reason for running is pretty straightforward and very simple. It's not complicated. And, and I think it's important that people not have to be trying to work with, when people say, well, I'm going to improve this. Well, how are you going to improve that? And I'm going to do that. I think it's going to be very concrete. Here's the things you can do. Here's the things you can't do. Here's how you get the stuff. I look at things in a very systematic way. When you look at something like right now, they're talking about cell phones. All right. So the first thing I do is I look at the research and say, what does it say if you take cell phones out of the environment? It looks like that's a positive thing. The second thing I say to myself is, where have they done that in the last 2 years that's been successful? And then I say to myself, I want to send my administrators to that location to see how that works, so that I know what the hiccups are before they ever get here. And then if I know that that can be done, and I know what the problems are that I have to solve before it gets done, then I can move forward and do that. And I try to do those kind of things on a small scale and bring them up to a larger scale. So I put it in one location, was the high school, the middle school, and I work that, and then I work it into the larger thing. But, so I think things through like that. I start with, all right, what does the research say? Then where can I find that? If I can find it, I want to go see it. Once I've seen it, then I come back. Then I can look at the policy that's been successful, and then I can put that together so that people are assured that what I'm proposing to them and why I want to do it makes sense. When I was in Little Compton, they had a problem with their budget. They were looking for extra money. I said, listen, Little Compton's the perfect place to take tuition students. You have numbers of 14 and 15 kids in a classroom. We can add kids to each of the classrooms. They said, oh, it can't be done. The state won't let us do it. Well, you know what? Little Compton, when I was there, we started taking tuition kids, and they wanted to have a tuition that was like $17,000 or $18,000. I said, no, we're competing against the parochial schools, and those tuitions are $6,000. So I think today Little Compton has 11 or 12 kids that come to that district. Their parents pay money for them to go to school there, and they picked up that kind of money in their budget, and their budget's not a huge budget, so that was significant money. But those are the kinds of things you have to think through, those things, and you have to be creative.
Dr. Power, contact information if people have questions, want to talk to you, want to share ideas. What do you have email address?
My email address is R as in Robert, B as in boy, power, Power, right on my shirt. At Gmail, G as in girl, MAIL.com.
Excellent. And you are running for Newport School Committee. And one more time, just in closing, why should people vote for you on November 5th?
Well, I hope people will vote for me on November 5th because I think that I can help the Newport school system with some of the issues they have today. And I've had experience in a number of other places where I can bring that experience to the table and help them think through things and do things. And I hope that people will recognize that value, and I hope they'll vote for me. And if they don't vote for me, I am not offended by that.
All right. Well, very good luck. I was going to say very good luck. Very good luck. And also want to say thank you. As I said, thank everybody who runs for office. Takes a lot of time, takes a lot of patience. And I appreciate you running for office. The conversations we had 2 years ago, the conversations we have today are great. And I hope no matter what the outcome, you're a part of the conversation and people listen to you.
Well, I plan on staying involved in the school system. As you know, I raise money for the Pell School. We have a fund over there for over $1 million that we use, that they get interest out of every year. We gave $50,000 last year. We'll do that every year. It's a city fund that I helped develop. And we're going to do the same thing for Rogers High School. We're going to create a trust fund for Rogers High School for technology. I will stay involved in the schools whether I get elected or not. I've been here all my life, and I plan on, finishing out here. And I will always support the schools. I've been on the Ed Foundation for 30 years. My heart and soul is supporting the kids here and making sure that the school system here is as good as it can be.
Excellent. Look for Dr. Robert B. Power on your ballot. Early voting starts October 16th, general election November 5th. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. I want to thank Dr. Power for joining me today. If you missed any portion of that interview, want to watch it again, want to share it, all available on whatsupnuke.com as well as all of our social media accounts. If you want to compare contrast with other candidates, all can be found on our website. We'll be wrapping up all interviews this Friday. So you'll have this weekend up until next Wednesday or up until November 5th to look at all of the school committee candidates. Again, Robert B. Power running for school committee, and you can watch this interview again or share it on whatsupnuke.com. Thanks for watching.